Hello everyone. After a month of silence, I am finally posting my videos again. And I do humbly and sincerely apologize that it has taken so long. Things got really difficult there for a little bit, and I quite legitimately just wasn't sure what I could and should talk about. And honestly, I don't think I could have posted anything without bursting into tears there for a little bit. Most of it has been reconciled by now, and I am back in Germany. I am in Berlin right now. It's been a breath of fresh air to be back. And I've decided that I am going to recount what happened in summary and where I'm at now, and to just be honest. I spent a lot of time praying about it. But when I began this channel, I did it with the understanding that God wanted me to be vulnerable, not just talk about the book that I'm writing, but to talk about my personal journey in regard to this book. And that evidently includes things that I didn't think it was going to include. But I spent a lot of time talking to God about it, and I believe that not doing it is not part of the plan, not part of the reason why. Anyways, okay, so I'm going to try to give a very brief recap of what happened in a couple of minutes. Just some background is that for the past 5 years, since 2017, I have been living and working with a mission organization based out of England. The organization that I have served with was a training base, so my primary focus was training, learning to train, growing, being trained, stepping into leadership, working with already existing Christians, teaching English as a second language, practical ministry, those kind of things. Also, this mission organization that I work with requires you to raise your own support. So everybody who works for this mission organization raises their own financial support, pays for their own medical insurance, their own travel expenses, their own taxes every year, etc., etc. I'll probably do another video explaining the pros and cons and why I chose this, but I'm not going to do that in this video because it just will take away. So just understand that, I worked and lived on this base for 5 years, and that I'm responsible for paying my own support. Raising my own support and paying my own way. Okay, so before Christmas 2021, God confirmed indisputably that it was time for me to leave my base. This meant to leave my home, my place of security, everything that was familiar. I had just finally started receiving regular support since 2019, actually November 2019. Prior to that, I had not received regular support. I was always pinching pennies and trying to budget whatever money came in for my first 3 years as in full-time missions. And so it's been kind of a bit of a fresh breath, to be able to receive regular support. And then you can kind of plan a little bit more and fundraise and stuff as necessary. Okay. But when I was leaving England, I was leaving the security, I was leaving the ability to budget myself and all that other kind of stuff. And not only was God calling me to leave my base, but eventually I realized he was calling me to leave the UK, which meant I was going to be losing my visa, because you have to have a sponsor for the visa, and I was not going to be renewing my visa with them. And so that meant and he just was like, don't make any full-time commitments right now. So that meant that I couldn't just commit to another base and obtain a visa in another country, etc., etc. So this meant that I was going to be floating. That meant that I was going to be traveling a lot. And I reconciled myself to this thought of letting go of my security, because even though what I was doing was good work, I had kind of gotten stuck. I wasn't fully concentrating on the things that God had wanted me to. I was concentrating on other things. And one of the things too that I was not doing is, even though I was serving in ministry, I wasn't really serving in mercy ministries. By that meaning, I wasn't out there on the streets giving sandwiches to people or working in soup kitchens or helping refugee camps or with broken people. Like, these were things that I'd always wanted to do. It was in my heart to do them, but I just got so busy doing other things in ministry that I neglected these other things. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why God wanted to remove me out of my security in the UK, was because I think I'm one of those kind of people that I always need drastic shocks to snap me out of it and get me to change. But since he wasn't calling me anywhere in particular, I thought to myself, okay, Karen, God said, don't make any long-term commitments. Be careful you don't make a commitment to the first space you stay at. And sure enough, when I left England, I came and stayed in Berlin. I was like, oh, I could live here. And it's like, Karen, don't. Let's try a few more things. So since September, when I left the UK, I've been in Berlin, where I served for a little bit. I've been in Slovakia, where I did the authors training school. I spent a week in Budapest, which was actually just for me to just breathe for a moment and try to wrap my head around this new transition. And then I went to Cairo, and the plan was to be in Cairo over the holidays, possibly through the end of January, work my way to Israel, because the book I'm writing, 80 to 90% of it takes place in Israel, so it makes absolute sense that I should go to Israel. And then if that didn't really work out, I had a backup plan until I could get into Israel. And ultimately, everything that could possibly go wrong started to go wrong while I was in Cairo. And just through circumstances, I realized that I wasn't going to be able to stay in Cairo. I couldn't get into Israel, and my backup plan was not happening either. So one of the things that had happened is my financial support did not come in. The last time I'd received it was the end of October. And so whatever money I get at the end of one month is my living expenses for the next month. And I didn't get any money at the end of November. And then it was like the first week in December, and I still didn't receive any money. So I had to start contacting my church and everybody. And ultimately, it ended up being a case of people who had sent their money, it just hadn't arrived yet because of delays in holiday mail. And there were a few people that did forget to send money. And there were some misunderstandings on some things. And so I was really beginning to feel extremely stressed. And because one, I stress easily, which does prevent me from resting, especially where money is concerned. And two, I was feeling very humbled, because there's nothing more humbling than living off the generosity and support of other people, and then having to call them up and be like, hey, where's my money? It's ugh. But I was in Cairo, and because I didn't have any money come in, I was going to rent an apartment or an Airbnb, and the ones that I had found that I could afford ended up getting booked. And then when I had no money come in at all, I couldn't even consider anyways. I ended up staying there, wasn't going to work out. And then the plans that I had, the connections I'd hoped to make while I was there, just none of it happened. And I realized it got really difficult, and I just needed to leave. And I was feeling a very strong spiritual oppression as well. I don't really know how to describe that, but it was really weighing on me quite heavily. And then some conflicts arose, and I just wasn't sure what was going on. I just knew I had to get out. And I had been reaching out to all these different mission organizations and some friends. And of course, it's right before holidays, so everybody's gone. Nobody's receiving people over the holidays. They're fully booked. There's just nothing. And so finally I reached out to Berlin, and I was hesitant to reach out to any of the areas in the Schengen zone, because I'd already been in Berlin, Slovakia, and Hungary, 3 countries in the Schengen zone, so basically with that, it's as an American citizen, I can visit any of these countries without a visa for up to 90 days. But if I overstay 90 days within any of these countries, then I can be fined, I can be deported, or I can be blocked from entering these countries again. And there's a lot of countries included in this zone. And I knew I only had about a month left, and I didn't want to use it up. Anyways, but I was like, you know what? let me contact in the Berlin so that they could receive me. And I had a friend give me money so I could buy the plane ticket to get here. Some of my donation money came in, and between that and what my friend helped me with, I was able to afford the ticket. And I came down here on the 17th of December, and I was so happy. Oh, I was giddy happy. I was elated. I remember on the airplane that as soon as we had flown up into the air and then left, it's like that oppression that had been on me just suddenly went away, and I could breathe, and I felt so free. This isn't anything to say with Cairo specifically. I don't really know what all happened. Every country has their spiritual strongholds, and all of us experience sensitivity to them differently. And so this is what I was feeling in mine. And when I came back to Berlin, I was just so happy, so giddy. There were people who were like, Karen, we didn't know you were coming. And they were so happy to see me. And it's just, I was out walking every day, enjoying the cold air. I missed cold weather. In Cairo, it was like 20 degrees or like in the 70s Fahrenheit. And I was like, oh, this is too hot. And so I came back in the weather, and I got to visit a Christmas market. It was really wonderful. I've never visited Christmas markets before, and this one, in the Plaza had a Ferris wheel, and they set up an ice skating rink, and there was Christmas booths all around, and didn't spend a penny, but I got to walk around and enjoy it. And I go for a lot of walks here. And then on Christmas Eve, I was invited to go with some friends to a Christmas Eve service at the Berlin Dom Cathedral. It was so beautiful. The music was wonderful. The organ, listening to a woman with a spectacularly sounding soprano voice sing O Holy Night. And then Christmas brunch with some friends. And it's just, I thought to myself, I'm just not going to focus on anything else right now. I'm just going to enjoy. And, but the question still lingers. Where do I go from here? Cairo was tough. And things like, my financial support coming in had absolutely nothing to do with Cairo. There were several things that had absolutely nothing to do with Cairo. It's just they all happened at that time. It's like, the expression, when it rains, it pours. And it may have been out in the middle of the desert, but trust me, it was raining. And it was pouring. And I felt very discouraged. I felt very lost. I began to be afraid that I was about to be homeless. It was a very real feeling. Even though I knew logically I was not going to end up on the streets of Cairo, I knew I could call a friend. I knew if I had to, go back to the States or something. But it's like I couldn't hear God. I couldn't hear Him direct me anywhere. And I guess I was just stressing so loudly in my brain, there's no way I could hear His voice. All I could think and feel was, my money's not in, my plans are falling through, nothing's working out the way I wanted it to, there's conflicts happening on, I'm feeling this oppression, there's loud noises everywhere I go. And all I could keep thinking was that I'd given up my visa. In the UK, I'd given up my home, my security. Maybe I heard God wrong. Maybe all of this is happening because I'd gone out of His will. And I just began to experience fear and sadness, and it got really hard there. It got really, really hard. And there's this one day when I randomly remembered a scene from a movie. It was after I was praying again and asking God if I had left His will, and that's the reason why things were going so hard. And then I remember this scene from Disney's Swiss Family Robinson, which is based on a novel about a family who left their home to escape a war, trying to get into, I think, America. And on their voyage, they got shipwrecked. And the scene that I remembered, I hadn't seen this movie in about 15 years at least. And the one scene I remembered suddenly as I was praying was the night the husband and wife were sitting on the beach, their first night on the land, and the husband's lamenting to his wife about how he made a mistake moving his family out of his country. And the wife reminded him of the reasons why they left. And she said, "We were right to do this, and all that hasn't changed just because we're shipwrecked." And when I remembered it, that scene, it's like I just felt God telling me that I didn't make a mistake. And my difficulties had nothing to do with being out of His will. Sometimes bad things happen. Sometimes situations arise. Sometimes conflicts arise. It has nothing to do with Him. It has nothing to do with me making bad choices. Sometimes yes, but sometimes no. And I needed to stop stressing about that. And I just needed to trust Him, that He would get me out of it if I would trust Him. And He did get me out of it. And now I'm in Berlin. I don't know where I'm going from here. I've recently, this week, started repicking up on my book. I've decided to just kind of focus on mapping it out right now, determining what each chapter is going to be about. And that's about as far as I've gotten with that, but at least I'm picking up my writing again. I still have my painting of the eye with the cross and the pupil to remind me to keep my focus on Him. Again, most of the finances has been sorted. Still got to get through holidays to get the rest of it sorted. I'm asking the Lord what the wise thing to do is. There are places I can go, including back to the United States. That's an option. I've asked God if it's time for me to step out of missions for a little bit and go back to work. But I've asked Him this question twice before. And I just was understanding that He was saying, no, don't step out. You're not stepping out of missions. That's not what's happening. So I have to be careful that I don't give up, because I think that's kind of where I'm at right now. It's already been difficult even before I said goodbye to my base, and I was just kind of wondering, like, what am I doing? Am I really doing what God wants me to do? Am I honoring what people are giving me money for every month? Have I just gotten stuck? I have depression, and that kind of makes my negative emotions even stronger. So yeah, it's a lot of these things have crept up. And at the end of the day, God hasn't told me to leave missions. When He called me into it, it was a lifetime commitment. And it's kind of like marriage. You're going to hit a snag in your marriage, and then you're going to hit a point where you want out. And you can either be led by your emotions and give up, or you can fight through it. And I review this as a marriage contract. And I just have to push through it. I cannot let my emotions determine my decisions. I cannot make emotional decisions on something like this. And I can't quit, because I've written in my journals the reasons for my decisions, and I've had to go back. And I'm going to just encourage people right now, when you make decisions, especially with God, you need to write them down, and you need to write down what you heard, why, how it was confirmed, etc. Because the reality is, things are going to happen, situations are going to happen, you're going to get overwhelmed, you're going to feel discouraged, you're going to doubt your decisions, and you need to have record for you to go back and look at that and say, okay, no, this is what was going on. Just like that scene in the movie that I remembered, when the husband was just, all he could think about was that his family was shipwrecked and stranded alone on an island, and it was all his fault because he'd made a wrong decision. And the wife had to remind him their being shipwrecked had absolutely nothing to do with his decision. I mean, it did, but that wasn't the problem. They were right. Their decision to leave their country from that war that was happening, There was a reason for that, and they were right in their decision, and that didn't change just because they've been shipwrecked. So same thing with me. I made a decision years ago to sell everything that I had, my home that my mother had left me that was paid for, giving up my car, my security, my jobs, everything, to go into missions full time some years ago. And it's gotten tough a lot, but I've stuck it through. And now I've given up my most recent security and my home in the UK, and now I'm kind of floating. And it's difficult right now, and it's scary. But I made this decision on the word of the Lord, and he told me what to focus on, and he gave me things to keep my eyes on. And he told me right from the very beginning to keep my eyes focused on him. And he warned me that things were going to be difficult. He did warn me. And that means I can make a choice to either keep my eye focused on him and to push through all this, or just give up. I can go back to the States. I can readjust back to States life. I can get a job, and I can just live my life. And there's nothing wrong with that. But he's got something better for me here. And he's called me to this. I pursued it. He blessed it. He opened up the door. And so basically, here's the thing. I don't know what's going to happen right now. I am still a little bit scared. I am still stressed because I stress easily. The Lord is working with me on that. But I trust God. And I'm not going to quit. I might not understand what's going on right now. I might cry. I might keep feeling these emotions of discouragement. But I'm not quitting. And I just ask if you will all just be praying for me. It's not about the money. Okay, the money's there and the money's coming in. It's not about where I live. I'm always going to have a place to live. It's not about where I am or what I'm doing. I'm always going to have a place to be and always have something to do. What's important is that I'm focusing on the Lord and remembering to be faithful to what he's called me to do and not let other things distract from that. And to have faith that when other things do happen, that he'll carry me through. So I apologize that this video is so exceptionally long, but 22 minutes or 23 minutes is really not too bad in terms of recalling an entire month of events up to date. So on my next video, I will talk about where I am with my book and about the chapter content, the mapping that I'm working on. In the meantime, please keep me in your prayers as I am striving to not allow my emotions and my circumstances determine my future. And pray that I will just keep my eyes on the Lord. And I just pray that you too, with whatever you're going through right now, that you will also just hold on to the hope of the Lord and believe that he will carry you through. Because he will. Even if we don't know it, even if we don't feel it, even if we don't acknowledge it, he does. And God bless.